Welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. My name is Nate Whitson, and I'm the founder of Get in the Fight Ministries and our exclusive online fight club for Christian men. Everything we do here is dedicated to helping Christian men become the men that God meant for them to be. So if you're looking for helpful content and conversations that can help you to grow and become the man that God made you to be, then you're in the right place. But before we get started, please do me a huge favor and be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and then leave us a 5-star review. Doing that helps us to reach more men who are looking for content just like this. Also, if you'd like to learn more about our mission and how to get involved or how to join the Fight Club, then head on over to getinthefight.club. That's getinthefight.club and learn more today. But without further ado, it's time to get in the fight. So let's go. Hey guys, welcome to the Get in the Fight podcast. I'm your host, Nate Whitson. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. And thank you for sharing this with other people. We say that all the time, but man, it makes a big difference. We hear guys that are coming to the show that are sharing with us how they're finding it. And a lot of times that's the way it is. Somebody has shared an episode or they've let them know that they're listening to it, whatever it is. It works. It makes a difference. And of course, like, you know, the algorithm and all of that, whatever that nonsense is, if you go to YouTube and you look up at Get in the Fight, you'll find the podcast, subscribe to it, comment, share it from there. Again, makes a huge difference to reach more men just like you who are looking to get in the fight and become better men, better fathers, better husbands, just better followers of Jesus. And so again, if that's you, thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. We're glad that you're here. Today is episode number 89, and I'm calling it Divorce Data. And it's a kind of a different approach. It's a different way of maybe going through some of this material that I've been studying, but many of you know I work part-time as a sexual addiction recovery professional, certified through a group called the Freedom Fight. And as I talk to men, as I deal with pornography and its effect on marriage and family and all of these different things, I continue just to see the devastation of it. And so as I was doing some work on studying some more about that, the effects of pornography on marriage and divorce, I came across a website. It is www.wf-lawyers.com. I'll put that in the show notes. You can click on that link. I want to give attribution to them for that. But I found, like, just kind of like scanning through this long list of divorce data that they had, I found it very fascinating. And I thought that rather than just kind of condensing it and talking in general, I'm just going to read through a bunch of them, maybe comment along the way, and then just kind of shore it up at the end with some final thoughts. But when you hear these things today laid out like this, I think in a lot of ways it will speak for itself. I think that stories are better in communicating information than just giving data points like this. I typically stay away from just giving straight up data. But again, it's a very interesting, at least to me, very interesting set of facts that are really built around studies, over 115 studies in particular, that have kind of like condensed all of their information here into some of these up-to-date statistics on divorce. And again, we're trying to prevent divorce, but I know that many of you maybe have already been through divorce, maybe you're on the precipice of it, dealing with difficult marriages. And some of this obviously is going to be, tough to listen to. But as a ministry to Christian men, we need to get in the fight for marriage. We need to get in the fight for our families. And I think as you listen to this, at least when I'm going through this, it just strikes me in a lot of ways, but it strikes me to just go, I need to be better prepared. I need to be more protective. I need to be a better father in some ways and help my kids who are not yet married to not be in these statistics. I need to be a better husband in certain ways when I see this stuff. I need to be more engaged in my family's life or whatever it is. And so I want you just to listen closely to the details here. I want you to pay attention to what is said for what's causing these problems. And then I just want you to really just listen carefully and consider for yourself, are there any areas where you're vulnerable here? Are there any areas where you need to step it up as well? Or, where do you need to step in and help your kids or maybe your grandkids or your friends or your church to be more aware of some of these dangers? Okay, so this is kind of like, again, just a different approach to this podcast. I'm going to be just kind of reading through a lot of these things here, but that's what I hope happens. I hope that it causes you to become more alert, more aware. And if this causes you then to respond by getting more engaged, then this podcast will have done what I hope it does. And that's what we need is men that will get in the fight. That's the name of this ministry. That's really the mantra. That's the call to action as well, to get in the fight for your home, for your marriage, right? And again, I already mentioned this, but if you find today's conversation helpful, please share it. Maybe somebody needs to hear these very words and these conversations today. So share it with a friend directly, or maybe put it on your social media. And don't forget to subscribe at our YouTube channel. All right, here we go. Divorce statistics from over 115 studies for 2024. All right. Recent studies have shown that millennials, which I had to look this up, I can never remember. I'm a Generation X, I think. Millennials, though, are 1981 to 1996. That group of people born between 1981 and 1996, those people in that generation are choosing to wait longer to get married, which isn't necessarily a great thing, but they're staying married longer, and they are contributing greatly to both the decline of those who are getting married, but also the decline of divorce rates in the United States. I think that was just very interesting, right? They're waiting longer, and some of this probably has to do with a lot of different reasons, but it looks like they're waiting longer, partly because they're, playing married and they're having sex and they're cohabitating and they're doing all these things so that they don't get married earlier, like traditionally people have. But it also means that when they do get married, they're also staying married longer, which is also helping to reduce divorce. Again, I'm not saying this is a good thing, but it is an interesting thing. And again, it just makes me say this: the information that I'm going through here is not coming from a Christian perspective. I'm putting a Christian lens into what I'm reading here. But again, just know that this isn't like, studies from 115 studies of Christian families. This is just families, U.S. statistics. So now we're just going to kind of look through just divorce rates in general, but then we're going to look at like who's getting divorced, demographics of that, why they're getting divorced is fascinating. And again, just look for clues, look for vulnerabilities in your own life here. Look for areas that maybe you need to step up. The divorce rate, it says, per 1,000 married women is nearly double what it was in 1960. So I had to look this up here and see, but in 1950s and 60s, the divorce rate was about 2 women per 1,000 married women. So 2 divorces out of 1,000. And now it is much higher than that. It says nearly double that number, but it's fluctuated. It looks like the peak of divorce rates was in the 1980s, interestingly enough. You kind of had this like, Leave It to Beaver kind of families of the 50s and 60s that the hippies really rejected that whole thing, women's rights movements and all the rest. And so then you had this like generation or two post that, where divorce skyrocketed for all kinds of reasons. But that certainly is one of those. And so the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, very low divorce rates. Today, certainly much higher. Almost 50% of all marriages, we know this stat probably pretty easily, almost 50% of all U.S. marriages will end in divorce or separation. Here's kind of a breakdown of it, though. Researchers estimate that about 41% of all first marriages end in divorce. 60% of second marriages end in divorce, and then 73% of all third marriages end in divorce. Isn't that fascinating, by the way? A lot of us you see these stories and people are going, okay, this marriage didn't work. And rather than figuring out what was going on or putting Christ in the center, of course, we think that, without doing that and making corrections to that, what they've done is they just go like, let's just try this again. Maybe it was this other person, right? Bad circumstance, all these different things. And yet they get married, and the stats are even higher that they get divorced every time they remarry. I thought that was really interesting. So in general, the average is around 50%, but the way that it's broken up is that about 40%, 41% of first marriages, 60% of second marriages, and then 73% of all third marriages. I thought that was kind of fascinating. This says every 42 seconds, there's a divorce in America. That equates to 86 divorces every single hour, 2,046 divorces a day, 14,364 divorces a week, and 746,971 divorces every year. Every 16 seconds, there's a marriage in the U.S. That equates to 230 marriages per hour, 38,762 marriages a week, and 2 million marriages, just over 2 million marriages per year. There are nearly 3 divorces, however, in the time that it takes for a couple to recite their wedding vows, which takes about 2 minutes, and 430 divorces during the average time of a wedding reception. So while one married couple is celebrating their new union, they're going into it knowing that every 41% roughly of those marriages that are celebrating like crazy and everybody's toasting to it, 41% of those first marriages will end in divorce or separation. And during that stretch of celebration, 430 other divorces are happening during that same stretch of time. Really fascinating. Over a 40-year period, it says 67% of first marriages will terminate. 15% of adult women in the U.S. are divorced or separated, compared with less than 1% in 1920. So that's kind of, again, goes back to some of those stats I was telling you, like early on, people just did not divorce, less than 1% in 1920. Now 15% of all adult women in the United States are divorced. The average first marriage lasts about 8 years. Stats here show that the second marriages last about the same, and that people are waiting about 3 years after they divorce to remarry, if they remarry at all. And again, what's happening in today's world is because of hookup culture, people are cohabitating, or because of even just financial reasons, people are saying, it makes sense for us to be married, but not legally or not, by the state, because if we do, it might affect Social Security that we're getting from a deceased spouse or other benefits or different things. So there's like a discouragement in some ways of being married. But again, first marriages last about 8 years. Second marriages last similar time frame, slightly less. And then people are waiting about 3 years to remarry if they do at all. Who's getting divorced? 60% of all divorces include people who are ages 25 to 39. Think about how high of a number that is. 60% of all divorces, right? So you look at this and you just say, there are 750,000 almost divorces every year. 60% of that number will be people who are 25 to 39. That just kind of makes me pause when I hear that and just think, man, we have to then in the church do a better job in this whole like premarital counseling space, this early marriage years, not even just premarital counseling. I know like we did some of that when my wife and I got married, and thought it was super helpful. I think the information that we went through was called Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. Amazing guy, amazing ministry. And I love that book. In the series, we watched a video series on it. Thought it was super helpful. I still think about some of the information in there to this day, 20 years into our marriage. But I think of a lot of people's stories here who not only need more help going into marriage. I mean, you think about like the statistics on like what the amount of time that people spend prepping for the ceremony versus preparing for the marriage, right? We know it's out of whack. We need to do a better job if it's your kids or your grandkids, maybe it's you listening to this, whatever the situation. How do we help people be better prepared to be married and stay married for life? I think some of the training, some of the time, whatever it is that we need to think of here needs to go into helping those who are, married in those first couple years. We know that there's a lot of help for those premarital counseling sessions. What about those people who are married, in those first 3 to 5 years? That's where kids come, bills start to pile up, the honeymoon phase ends, real life kicks in, finances can be tough, all of this kind of stuff. This just, again, 60% of all divorces are 25 to 39-year-olds. Maybe we need to really look at some of the clues here and figure out how do we help. Moving on, it says, among the population segments with the lowest likelihood of being divorced are Catholics, 28%, evangelicals, 26%. Again, population with lowest likelihood of being divorced. This was interesting. Adults making more than $75,000 annually, which represents 22% of people. Interesting, right? So they're going from like Catholics, evangelicals, and then all of a sudden people who make 75,000 annually or more are less likely to divorce. Interesting, right? So we know that money and finances play a huge role in divorce. And there's something about being below that number that people are just unhappy. They're unsatisfied with their income. They can't do the things they want to do, the pressures that come with life. That kind of makes sense to me. I just thought that was really fascinating. It's thrown in here. Who's getting divorced and who's least likely? Having a little bit more money does help. And again, what happens though also that leads to this divorce is people that are pursuing money end up ruining their marriages as well. So just the pursuit of having more money doesn't fix it, but somehow this stat is in there. And I think it's fascinating. I'll be curious, if you have thoughts on this, to hear what you think of that. Moving on, who else is least likely to get divorced? Asians, 20%. And those who deem themselves to be conservative on social and political matters, 28%, tied for the highest percentage there. That's who's least likely. The divorce rate among people 50 and older has doubled in the last 20 years. The divorce rate among couples where one spouse is in jail or in prison for 1 year or more is 80% for men and almost 100% for women. If women have a spouse who's going to be in jail for a year or more, they're almost 100% going to be divorced. Obviously, the lifestyle that people lead, when you're thinking, he seems like a nice guy, or I've got all I've got all girls, so I tend to think of it this way, where they're just, deciding on who is a quality person. And again, if the listening of this, who knows, they're young enough that they're probably not quite settled on that necessarily. And nobody that I know that they are dating is right now looking like they're going to go to jail. So that's good for them and that's good for us. But the point is, people look at their spouse and they don't, or this potential for a spouse, and they just don't even think about the character of this person. And man, if that person ends up in jail, the likelihood for divorce just goes through the roof. So when are people getting divorced? January is considered divorce month. People start looking for information before the new year starts, but they can't do much until the attorneys are back in the office. January 12 through 16 seems to be the magic week for filings. How sad is that? You think about this. In fact, we were just watching some show on TV the other day. This was exactly what this lady was saying, is like, we're going to stay married through Christmas for the sake of the kids. And then I'm divorcing you. It's over. And, they're like living this lie. And then the divorce attorneys come back after the new year, starting around the 12th. Everybody's back in office. Life moves forward. New year, new you. And people file for divorce. That's when people are filing. Why people are divorcing. Here's where it gets very fascinating to me. Number one, it said lack of commitment is the most common reason. According to a national survey, lack of commitment is number one at 73%. That they argue too much is 56%. Infidelity was 55%. 46% said they married too young. 45% said they had unrealistic expectations. 44% said there was a lack of equality in the relationship. 41% said there was lack of preparation for marriage. We just kind of talked about that there. And 41% are acknowledging it. Gosh, we were not prepared for what this actually was going to look like. But man, we had a great wedding celebration, right? What a waste, right? Like what a tragic waste to spend so much more time on the wedding party versus the wedding and the marriage itself. 41%. Domestic violence or abuse was 25%. And then I think, again, if you were to look at this and be like, wait, that doesn't equal 100. No, it doesn't. And it's because when people are citing the reasons for divorce, they are citing more than one. And so you're going to have some that are saying lack of commitment and infidelity, argue too much, and unrealistic expectations, or whatever it might be. So they do add up to more than 100. But these are the common reasons, with lack of commitment being number one by a good stretch. What makes people more or less likely to divorce? 48% of those who marry before the age of 18 are likely to divorce within 10 years. Interesting. Compared to 25% of those who got married after the age of 25. Then 60% of couples, though, married between 20 and 25 are going to end in divorce. So this is crazy. 48% of those who married before 18 are likely to divorce within 10 years. 60% though who wait till age 20, they're like, I'm too young. I'm only 18. I'm only 19. They're like, okay, cool. Now I'm 20. Those that got married between 20 to 25, 60% still end in divorce. A good question then that maybe we ought to ask people is, when you consider these stats in these early years, from 18 to 39, when that's making up the bulk of divorce, why do you think you'll be the exception? It's a great question. If you go through some of these stats, again, I'll give you that link in the show notes. You can go back through these and find these for yourself. But as you go through these, maybe just highlighting them to a friend or to a family member or to your children or grandchildren, whatever it is, ask them the question, why do you think, if this is happening to this huge number, hundreds of thousands every single year, why do you think you are going to be the exception? And then let them answer. I think it's a really good question, and it might really give some seriousness and some gravity to this issue of getting married. Hey guys, I wanted to take a quick break from the show to share with you 3 things that I think could help you to become more of the man that God meant for you to be: a better husband, a better father, and a better follower of Jesus Christ. 3 things, totally free, that I think can help you. Number 1 is our podcast. Hit the subscribe button, share them with a friend. That makes a big difference, not only in your life, but in somebody else that you care about as well. And it helps us to reach more men. Number 2, we do a free weekly newsletter that is short, it's concise, it deals with just one key question and then 3 simple action items each week that will help you to get in the fight in a really practical way. You can find that at getinthefight.club/newsletter. And then lastly, you can join our Fight Club community. This is a free private app for Christian men only, where you can talk to guys and get involved with guys' lives from all around the world who are just like you, trying to get in the fight to be better men for Christ. You get things like daily devos, weekly challenges, monthly gatherings, small groups, so much more. It's kind of like a Facebook group, but exclusively for Christian men, and it's totally awesome, and it's totally free. getinthefight.club/join and check it out. Get more today. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, get our newsletter, get involved in our Fight Club. Totally free things to help you to get in the fight and win today. All right, that's it for now. Thanks for listening. Back to the show. How about this one? If both you and your partner have had previous marriages, you are 90% more likely to get divorced than if this had been the first marriage for both of you. Man, that is a crazy stat. Both of you and your partner have both been married and then divorced, and you get married, 90% more likely to get divorced. That's crazy. How about this for religious affiliation and divorce? If a person has strong religious beliefs, the risk of divorce is 14% less. And having no religious affiliation makes you 14% more likely to get divorced. Again, just questioning this when you're talking to people who are getting married about their religious beliefs. Are you marrying somebody who is unequally yoked, the Bible says? Are you marrying somebody you're just hoping that they kind of fall in line and become this amazing Christian person? Be very careful. How about this one? This Dr. Jennifer Glass says that this is fascinating. One of the strongest factors predicting divorce is the concentration of conservative or evangelical Protestants in that county that you live in. Let me read that again. I thought that was fascinating. One of the strongest factors predicting divorce is the concentration of conservative or evangelical Protestants in the county. Where you live matters. But how about this? This kind of blew my mind. If you live in a Republican red state, you are 27% more likely to get divorced than if you lived in a Democrat state. What? I don't even know how those 2 things jive. I really don't. I'm just reading to you what the stats say, though. And I just thought that is shocking. How can that be that if you live in a concentrated state that's more evangelical or conservative, that could be the case? But I think maybe what they're saying is that the county that you live in, like, look at, like, at the recording of this, we just went through a presidential election, and it'll show you, like the state I'm in, Michigan, went red in this last election, but it's a swing state. So there's times it goes red, sometimes it goes blue. But when you look at the breakup of like our entire country, you'll see that the majority of it really is red, conservative, Republican. And so you might live in a blue state, and it really maybe affects that, like, because you're in those bigger inner cities that have so many more people, that it might be considered a blue state. but you might live in a red county within that blue state. Let's use California. I got a buddy out there who lives in a really conservative area of California. And even in this last election, fascinating enough, 40% of California voted red, Republican, conservative, but all along the coast in these really, really big cities, you have Democrats. So anyways, thought that was fascinating. There, the county that you live in matters to the likelihood of you getting divorced or not. Conservatives are statistically here the least likely to be divorced. How about if you live together and cohabitate? This is pretty common for people today and probably for a long time now. 60% of cohabitating couples will eventually marry. I thought that was interesting. They actually do get married, 60%. However, living together prior to being married increases your chance of getting divorced by as much as 40%. Right? So like when you're playing house and you're playing married and you're not really fully committed before you move in, but you're going to be like, hey, we're going to test drive this car here to make sure it works. You'll probably get married, but you'll probably get divorced. That's what that's saying. Very fascinating. The cohabitating experiment doesn't work in terms of creating strong, stable, lasting marriages. According to this study, at least if you met your spouse in high school, college, or grad school, you are 41% less likely to get divorced. Interesting. Not surprising. Couples who met in bars are 24% more likely to get divorced than expected. How about with sexual history? Women who lost their virginity as a teenager are more than twice as likely to get divorced in the first 5 years of marriage than women who waited until 18 or older. So losing your virginity earlier in life, there's a study in 2011 from Iowa that confirmed that for both men and women, the earlier that you lose your virginity, the higher statistically the chances are that you divorce within your first 10 years. And that kind of just makes sense, right? It makes sense that the earlier you buck the system and go against what God has said is the right way, the more dysfunction that you bring into how you view all relationships, leading to the breakup of marriage much sooner than others. Girls who were sexually active at 13 or 14, really young, were less than half as likely to be in a stable marriage in their 30s. Being stable was 5 years or longer of marriage. Again, just the earlier you start, the worse your odds are of having a stable home, a family like you hope for. Women with 6 or more premarital sexual partners were almost 3 times less likely to have a stable marriage later on. Kind of just makes sense, right? The risk of divorce was said to be almost doubled, 97% higher when the mother went to work, but the husband makes a, quote, minimal contribution to the housework and childcare. When you got this lazy bum of a man in this marriage, she's working and going every day and she's busting her butt and she's doing what you should be doing, but you're making minimal contribution, at least in her eyes, 97% higher chance of getting a divorce. How about this one? Facebook was cited as a major contributor to 33% of divorce petitions in the UK. Facebook. Why is that? Oh, because Facebook's really neutral, right? You're just saying hi to friends. No, you're seeing old flames and people on there that you are, maybe used to be romantically connected to or interested in. And it just kind of like, again, it just fans into flame all kinds of problems. 33% of divorce petitions as a major contributor was Facebook. How about this one? And this is really kind of what led me to this study. Pornography addiction. Pornography was cited as 56% of a major factor of divorces, according to recent studies. If you are dealing with pornography addiction and you think, well, it's just this private thing, it doesn't affect anybody else, it's not real sex, I'm just doing it, it's just me, it doesn't harm anybody, it does. 56% of all divorces list pornography addiction as one of the significant factors. How about this one? If your parents are happily married, then your risk of divorce decreases by 14%. Just by living in a home where you were blessed, where your parents actually still like each other, they're still happily married, blesses you in your marriage by keeping you less likely to get divorced. I thought that was amazing. How about this one? If your parents married if your parents married others after divorcing, so that if they get divorced and then remarry, you are 91% more likely to get divorced. So the opposite kind of stat here. If your parents are happily married, you have less odds. You're less likely to get divorced. But if your parents divorce and remarry, you are 91% more likely to get divorced. That's fascinating to me. That's amazing. How about this one? In this study called Understanding the Divorce Cycle, it said the risk divorce is 50% higher when one spouse comes from a divorced home, and it's 200% higher when both of you do. Holy smokes. Who's at risk of getting divorced? 50% higher when one of you get married, and let's say it's you or your spouse comes from a divorced home, you have a 50% higher chance of getting divorced. If both of you come from divorced homes, a 200% higher chance of getting a divorce yourself. That's incredible. It says this, in addition, children of divorce are 50% more likely to marry another kid of divorce, another child of divorce. You're going to relate. You're like, oh, you grew up in a home like that? So did I. And guess what? When you two both have come from homes like that, again, 200% chance higher that you will end up in the same position, put your kids through the same stuff. Man, this is heavy. How about this one? Certain studies have shown that daughters of divorced parents have a 60% higher divorce rate in marriages than children of non-divorced parents, while sons have a 35% higher rate. It impacts daughters significantly. Daughters of divorced parents have a 60% higher divorce rate than children whose parents were not divorced. Man, and again, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and it was just like, when a man marries a woman who comes from a divorced home, and in particular has a beef with her dad, has a strained relationship with her dad, she is a hard woman to crack in terms of really letting you into her heart and mind. She's been hurt. She's been broken by this dysfunction in her home, and she will carry it forward with you. You have to be careful that you don't marry somebody who's cute, but you haven't really just seen how healthy and strong she has become. And again, this doesn't mean that, children of divorce aren't able to have strong homes. That's clearly not true. Thank God, right? God can do anything, and he does great healing and fixing and changing. But man, these stats are what they are. And again, these aren't within the church. These are just in general. But you have to pay attention to the clues. And that's why we're doing this divorce data podcast like this. Is just like, these are some wow, pause, let's think through this kind of things that we need to really think about and consider, and maybe even just, again, share with others, because it's leading to so many divorces and so much pain. How about this one? It goes on. Half of all children in the U.S. will witness the ending of a parent's marriage. Of that half, close to half of them will see the breakup of that parent's second marriage. Just follows with it. They're just watching divorce after divorce after divorce. And guess what they do? They marry somebody who also has watched divorce. They get married, and they also are way more likely to divorce. It's sad. Having a baby before marriage increases your risk by 24%. You are almost 25% more likely to divorce if you have a baby before marriage. Feeling that one spouse spent money foolishly increased the likelihood of divorce by 45%. So again, it goes back to that idea of, 75,000 was that magic number there, that you're less likely to divorce if you made more than 75,000. There's a connection here with money when times are tough, the money is tight, and stress and all those things come in. You have a baby, you have, not very much money, car breaks down, all these things, right? When that's all compounded by a feeling that a spouse handled money poorly, your likelihood for divorce goes up to 45%. Couples that argue about finances at least once a week are 30% more likely. I would have guessed higher. Couple more here. Couples are an astonishing, and I know, again, by the way, this is a terrible way of just reading stats. Stats are like, I forget the numbers, can't remember anything you told me. I get that. This isn't a way that I'll do very many of these, but I just thought, like, man, it just, story after story, stat after stat, data after data, to me was like, wow, this is this is a lot. And again, we'll kind of sum this up here in a second, but just know if you're feeling like overwhelmed by the numbers, I get it. I kind of am too, but it's making a point, and we'll get there. How about this? Couples then are an astonishing 76 to 95% more likely to get divorced if one of them smokes. The amount increases when the wife is the partner with the habit. Thought that was super interesting. While couples who both smoke have it a bit better, they are still 53% more likely than non-smoking couples to end in marriage. Thought that was interesting. Yeah, smoking has an impact on whether or not you stay married. Interesting. And if it's the wife that has the problem, it gets worse. How about this? Each liter of alcohol consumed raises the chance of divorce by 20%. The average American drinks 9.4 liters of alcohol per year, raising their divorce likelihood by 188%. However, if one spouse is a heavy drinker and the other is not, they're 60% more likely to get divorced. Interesting. So I'll read that one more time. 20% higher chance of divorce for every liter of alcohol consumed. And if the average person drinks 9.4 liters a year, your risk of divorce increased by almost 200%. That's pretty wild. Again, just kind of making the case, like, think about how we have been sold that the party life is the great life. Sleeping around, drinking alcohol, that's every commercial. That's like every story out of college. Like, we've just been bought this lie. The devil is working in the details here, and families are paying for it. And then those of us that were raised in places like that are going out and doing the same and repeating it. We just have this endless cycle because we've bought into these lies that alcohol makes your life better. It's more fun. It's where the party is. It's not. It doesn't end the way that the party scene presents itself to you. How about this one? And this one I think is going to continue to go up way higher over the years. A recent study of divorce petitions found that nearly 15% said that video game addiction was a major factor. Again, I think that number is just going to keep going up and up. 43% of children in the U.S. are being raised without their fathers. 43%. When the parents are happily married, though, we've seen this already, the risk of divorce decreases. Boys and girls are being raised without their dads, and it has devastating impact. If a close friend, listen to this one, if a close friend gets divorced, you are 147% more likely to get divorced and 33% more likely if it's a friend of a friend. What is that saying to you? If you are around people at work, your close buddies, your closest friends are talking about divorce, it impacts you. Isn't that fascinating? 150% higher almost chances that you get divorced simply because you're around people who are going through divorce or got divorced. The way they talk bad about their wife, she's a piece of crap, he's a piece of crap, they're terrible. Now I'm out partying, I'm sleeping around, look at what I'm doing, life is so great. And man, that just plants a seed in these people's minds, like, man, maybe so. Man, my wife is not doing this and this, and it starts to snowball, doesn't it? 150% chance more likely if your close friend gets divorced. Fascinating stuff. How about this one? A study at University of California and Brown University said that when a married person works with someone who's in the process of divorcing, it increases the married person's chance of divorce by 75%. So again, way higher odds if it's a close friend, but just working with somebody who's in the process increases your odds of divorce by 75%. It impacts us when we're around people who are going through this. Families with children who were not poor before the divorce see their income drop by as much as 50%. And 60% of the people who are under poverty guidelines today are divorced women and children. Divorce has a major impact on our psyche, on our financial life, on all kinds of different things here. And the majority of those that suffer are women and children. A new study, last one, that was called Divorce and Death, showed that that broken marriages can kill at the same rate as smoking cigarettes. So now we all know, we've all heard the stats that smoking cigarettes increases your likelihood of death by, huge numbers, right? What this study is saying is that the risk of dying is 23% higher among divorcees than among married people. The way that cigarettes kill is similar to the way that divorce crushes our spirit and actually leads to dying sooner. So as you listen to all that, again, I apologize if it's just like, okay, dude, that you killed me there with data. I don't like it. I don't love the data approach, but I was just fascinated by all those things. Who's getting divorced? When are they getting divorced? Why are they getting divorced? And the reason I wanted to go through that is because success leaves clues, and so does failure. Success leaves clues. Like, watch what great marriages look like. The way that they treat each other, the way that they fight through hard times together, the way that they're committed to prayer together, the way that they love one another, the things that they do. Success leaves clues in great marriages. Failure, like this divorce data, also leaves clues. Smokers, video game addiction, pornography, hanging out with people at the bars or hanging out with people at work who are talking bad about their marriages, all of these different things, all the stuff that we listed here, right? It impacts your life. And not only that, but it impacts those that you care about in your life. We need to learn from this divorce data and figure out what adjustments do we need to make. So here's the thing, like why are so many people getting divorced and seeing their lives, again, just leading to upheaval, higher risk of dying, physically dying sooner because of divorce? It's just like, financially speaking, 60% of those who are not considered poverty level get a divorce, and now they're trying to figure it out on their own with their kids, mostly women, but certainly men too. And the money is just not the same. And now life is so hard. Now the bitterness sets in. Now the financial stuff, all of the things falling apart. It's terrible. And we need to take it on. We need to look at this with the lens of like, what's happening and how do we fix this? John 10:10, you've probably heard this, but John 10:10 says that the devil has a mission. The Bible calls him, Jesus calls him a thief. And the thief is coming to steal. He's coming to kill. He's coming to destroy your marriage. And we look at this data and we see some of these clues, and yet we still think somehow as Christian men, we can, avoid that happening to us. And yet we still don't get in the fight. We don't do the things we need to. We don't work hard at our marriage anymore. We let things slide. We let things fall apart around us. And the thief just slowly but surely just steals everything, destroys and kills everything. It's his only mission. He's a liar, Jesus says, and he has a mission. But Jesus also has a mission. At the end of John 10:10, it says, but I have come, Jesus speaking, I have come that they may have life more abundantly. More abundantly. When we look at these stats, I just think, man, again, I'm telling you, like, I know from 20 years of marriage that you have to work hard at it. Marriage is amazing, but you can't coast in it. You've got to keep fighting for it. You've got to keep working at it. You've got to work through hard things. You've got to go through painful moments, but it's so worth it, not just for you, but for those that you love. I also look at this as a father of 4 daughters who are not yet married. And I look at these things and I say out loud to them, hope they'll listen through this. Hope we get a chance to talk through this. Why do you think your marriage will end different than so many of these here? And the answer is in Christ. Christ gives us the ability to die to self, to serve our spouse, to treat them as if, Christ were loving them and he was using us to do it, right? This beautiful picture of what marriage is and how it sanctifies us and chisels us and makes us into more of who we want to be. This complementary person in our life that kind of drives us crazy at times and we don't understand. They operate so different. God uses that in a beautiful way to bring life abundantly. But the world is screaming at us that the way to abundant life is this other path. And we know that it leads to stealing, killing, and destroying everything that we really wanted. And so we need to get in the fight. We need to fight for our marriages. And I just ask you, like, as you listen to this, where were you prompted by God in that? What stood out to you? Was there something in this conversation today that leads you to think, man, I could see that being me? Maybe there's an area of neglect in your marriage or in your heart, or maybe there's an area where you're cheating, maybe not yet physically, but in your mind, you're wandering, you're spending time with people who are just talking bad about their spouse, and you're like, maybe it's causing me to think a little bit of that way too, or whatever it is. Where is God prompting you to get into the fight? Where do you need to maybe break off relationships? Maybe with alcohol, maybe a relationship with nicotine or with marijuana or whatever your thing is. Where do you need to break up your relationship with video games, friends at work, friends online? Maybe it's pornography or all these other things. What is it that you need to do to get in the fight today and be more of the man that God meant for you to be, and more of the man that you want to be in your next marriage or your first marriage or the one that God has currently placed you in? Let's make those better. Let's get better as men. Now, before I close this up though, too, obviously, if you've made it this far in here and you've been divorced, kudos to you. I just want to say to you that there is grace and renewal and forgiveness available in Jesus. And I certainly did not mean to, pile on you with guilt or shame or condemnation in any way. And reading these things, especially if you're like, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me. It's like, please know that that isn't my goal, that you would feel more of that guilt and shame and all these things. But we need to have these hard conversations for the sake of those who have not yet experienced what it's like to go through that. And we want to keep them from that. We need to still speak God's ideal, even if none of us live the ideal, right? We need to know that God has come that we might have life abundantly. And some of these things from this divorce data, I think, can help prepare and protect those who have not yet been through that. So again, but if that was you, just know I don't mean to add to your pain there, but in Christ, there's forgiveness and there's hope and healing. Last thing here, at the end of 2024, maybe beginning of 2025, there's a new book coming out that I co-wrote called Let's Talk About Sex, 20 Things Christian Husbands and Wives Wish Their Spouse Knew or Would Do, but they don't know how to tell you. The reason I say that is I want you to look for that book, of course, and it's because I believe in it. I think one of the things that we can do to get in the fight for our marriages is when we learn how to talk and communicate and work hard at and fight hard together for our marriages. And that book is going to give you all kinds of questions. Again, it's very sex related, what a man thinks and wishes his wife understood and knew, and the questions that he really would love to have her answer and just understand about what he thinks about sex in particular, but also from a woman's perspective. It was co-written by a lady named Amy McKinley from Ultimate Intimacy, and she wrote it from the woman's perspective and gathered data from thousands of women who came back and reported different things there. But again, my point to you is this: we need to fight for marriage. That's why I'm mentioning this here as we close with this. We need to learn to talk. That book, Let's Talk About Sex, is simply a book about how do we learn to do it in practical ways. Well, whether that's about sex or your video game habit or any other thing, we need to get in the fight for our marriages, and it begins and ends with better communication. We need to find ways to communicate and talk and fight hard together. And so that's my prayer for you, that you'll learn to do that. You'll learn to be aware of the ways the devil is trying to steal and kill and destroy, and that you'll push hard into your marriage so that you can have life more abundantly. Don't give up on your marriage. God can do anything, no matter what you've been through, what you're going through. And we're going to pray hard, and we're going to do this together as married couples so that we can fight and win for our sake, but also for the sake of those that are around us. So listen, get in the fight hard for your marriage, and listen to the next episode here, and we'll talk to you very soon. Hey guys, thanks so much for being here today and listening to the show. Please be sure to head over to the website at getinthefight.club. And before you go, if you haven't already, please subscribe, click the like button, and leave us a positive 5-star review. It makes a huge difference whenever you do. Have a great day. Go get in the fight.